Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to a very fascinating week we've got for you this time. We were in the last week of the regular season for Division 2 and 3 on a world map, and we had the first round of playoffs for Divisions 4 and 5, and we've got to preview some semifinals coming up in Division 1. So we got a lot of really exciting matchups as we get into that playoff season finally. I am joined, as always, by Calamity. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing good. How are you?
Yeah, very early again for you. So make sure to drink an extra cup of coffee there. And we're joined by Division 2, TheRealClyde. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Glad to have you. Yeah, a pretty good season from you. Didn't quite make the playoffs, but we'll get your opinions on Division 2 and your rivals anyway. And so, we'll jump right in then with what you all are here to see. Division 1, the semifinals, Boxa versus Pluki, Raidman versus Orpheus. Raidman and Orpheus is a rematch of last season's semifinal as well, and this will be taking part on an AI generated world. It is a best of one semifinal, so no mistakes on this one, Clyde.
Yeah. So for Raidman versus Orpheus, yeah, I mean it should be a pretty close matchup. Orpheus does have the advantage in total points this season, but that's only because Raidman missed a week, so probably not too much to look into there. Raidman does have a slight edge when it comes to perfect scores and aces this season, and he also does have a lot more playoff experience than Orpheus in Division 1. I know he won Season 3, and he's pretty much made every Division 1 final since Season 2, I believe. So I guess just based on that, I'd expect Raidman to be a favorite again in this matchup, but obviously Orpheus is a very capable player who certainly has the talent to beat him. So yeah, on a world map, they figure to be fairly evenly matched, I would imagine. So should be a fairly competitive one.
Definitely. Yeah. Boxa played Pluki in week 1, Calamity, where he did get the better of him. Raidman and Orpheus played each other on a world map, and it finished perfect draw for both of them. So we can definitely see these matchups are going to be pretty tight.
Yeah, but I think you can't really take too much out of those results during the regular season because for Orpheus and Raidman, while it was a world map, it was Volvo dealerships where essentially there was one person who dropped more than 3 points. And yeah, Poland, I don't think is going to be too representative unless we get Poland in the world map seed, which is always possible, but, bit unlikely. And I think if you want to look at anything, it may be the week 7 results from a hard world, where that might be what comes closest to being representative for the game we're going to play. I mean, obviously, probably going to be a little less rural than that seed was. But on that, we had a very, very good score from Raidman, who had by, I think, about 1,700 points, the best score on that. And then Orpheus and Boxer were about even with 21.8 and 21.6, and then Pluki with 20.7 thousand, just slightly behind. I think in general, you always still got to favor Boxer and Raidman. I mean, Orpheus is probably going to be happy if he can at least get a decent performance. We know last season when he got to the playoff semifinals, he kind of had a pretty poor game in that. So if he can at least make have a reasonable showing, then I'm sure he'll be happy no matter what Raidman does. And yeah, for Pluki, it's his first playoff experience. He just snuck in there. Essentially, he was closer to 10th place than 3rd. So I'm sure he'll just be happy to be there. Of course, if he can beat Boxer, then just all the better, but I'm sure he's not expecting it.
I definitely think that if we're going to have a new champion or even a new finalist besides Box and Raymond, who have been our finalists for the last 2 seasons, it's going to be this week. Because if maybe Boxa is an Orpheus or Pluki and Raymond is our final, in a best of 3, I would favor our 2 kind of, returning finalists anytime. And so if they want to, one of the Frenchmen want to kind of take one of those spots, it's going to have to be this week where they've got a one shot on at a world map. It's going to hope that a perfect game or near perfect game is going to be good enough. to snipe that position, but it's going to be very close indeed. So best of luck to all 4 of our semifinalists in the Division 1 championship playoffs. Just a real quick note before moving on to Division 2. Calamity, you are taking on Verdoc on a best of 3 relegation decider out of Division 1. We did go into detail about this last week, about these maps and everything. But just remind everybody watching that these are the 3 maps that will be playing on Poland, Jordan, and Europe. But just maybe ask you, Calamity, how have your practice been going over the last week?
Well, because I had to create all of these seeds for the other divisions as well, obviously I've played quite a lot of these maps in particular. I mean, I might as well bring it in here as a little fun fact. I mentioned it in a Reddit post as well, but sort of the most banned maps. Out of all the bans I got, we had 20 bans for Russia, 13 for Australia, 10 for Canada, 7 for Hardworld, and then 6 for Poland, 4 for Jordan, and 2 for Europe. So those 3 maps were the ones that generally were by far the least banned. So I had to create quite a few maps for them. And I would say in general, like Poland and Jordan, I feel pretty comfortable on. Jordan can always throw some curveballs at you, and Poland does have, rounds in the middle of nowhere occasionally. But even then, I think I've gotten somehow, even though before that, I should have said I have no idea, I've gotten somewhat decent at telling the area of Poland, even without any further information. And yeah, then Europe is always just, I mean, I guess it's Europe. Like, it can have countries that are just not to my liking. And yeah, I'd rather not get those. I've gotten slightly better at Greece recently, and I feel like most of Greece I've had in practice has been rather easy. So maybe that's not a worry anymore. But there's plenty of other, especially Cyrillic countries in Europe that, are not quite as nice.
Definitely. Well, good luck on that one. And then, shifting over to Division 2, they had the last week of their regular season on the IntersectionGuessr world map. And pretty decent scores across the board here, Clyde. Snorlax and Shumi, best of the division so far, 1 and 2, share the points at the very top, both of them getting a perfect score.
Yeah, Snorlax and Shumi obviously showing why they're both on top of the table and getting promoted to Division 1. So good job to both of them. Overall, solid performances across the division, I'd say, with just about everyone getting above 22,000. It wasn't a super difficult seed in my opinion, at least compared to Division 3. We'll get to that. But there were definitely a couple of tricky rounds that prevented most people from getting 25Ks. There weren't a ton of surprises in terms of the results, with most of the higher ranked players in the table getting wins over the lower ranked ones. So I'd say, let's see. Barry and Renata both winning their matches with nearly perfect scores. So no surprise considering their positions on the table. And Orbodka with a great performance as well, just missing out on a perfect score. And that win would keep them safe from the relegation playoffs.
Yeah, Calamity, as Clyde said, pretty much the upper half of the division taking the wins here, which means not a whole lot changes. And none of these lower players able to pull off any upsets.
Yeah, we had a lot of potential for upsets, but just none really happened. And as we'll see in a second, that means the table pretty much stays the same. Overall, as Clyde said, not the hardest seeds. A lot of people who got relatively close to a perfect score. And as we kind of expected pretty much and saw pretty much throughout the season, these were generally the results that you could have seen coming between these players. All of the favorites winning their matchups. Some, a pretty decent fight again put up by Ice, who's had a decent finish to the season. Just not quite good enough to leave that 11th spot, unfortunately for him. And other than that, Shumi and Snorlax, of course, with perfect games from each of them, just make sure they stay at the top. And yeah, just good scores all around, pretty much.
Yeah, I think that you, Clyde, were probably the one most frustrated that nobody pulled an upset off, because you needed somebody to lose something in order to possibly get into the promotion playoff. Just didn't quite work out in your favor there. So a bit unfortunate. Well, yeah, look at the table here. Yes, the only change here is that Max moves over Latemps with his loss to Orbuka. But despite his win, Orbuka still stays in 8th place, meaning that bottom half stays the same and that top half doesn't move either. Yeah, so Clyde, any comments on how the season went for you and maybe some of these other players in Division 2?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, I couldn't quite sneak into the promotion playoffs, but it would have probably taken a perfect score and some luck anyway. So overall, I'm pretty happy with how the season went for me. I get to stay in Division 2 for a 4th straight season now, assuming I'll be able to come back next season. Yeah, obviously I'm playing some very high level competition, and everyone above me in the table certainly deserved it, their spots as well. So yeah, no real qualms for me there.
Yeah, only one loss off of everybody above you had 7 wins, you had 6, so that's not bad at all. Perfect game from you as well. Probably aces are the thing you really need to improve on. If we look at that stat, 22 for you, everybody else above you in at least 30, so almost a 10 ace difference there. So to improve. Yeah, Calamity, any thoughts on how Division 2 finishes up?
Yeah, I think overall, like after a few weeks, we kind of already had a similar table to this. Maybe some movement in the top within the top 4, but I think they have been, even though Clyde is pretty close to them, but they have been pretty much the same throughout. So from that, not too many surprises. Shumi's kind of steadily been improving and getting better every season. So it'll be interesting to see how he'll do in Division 1 next season. And if we go back to the start of the season, I suppose Renata surprised me by being able to consistently be up there. And you got to remember, she still also had 1 week that she missed. So she could have been automatically promoted if she hadn't. I guess, Clyde, the same also true for you missing 1 week there. That may have also had an impact on the aces, although it was Russia, so maybe not. And
yeah, I wasn't. I did not have very high hopes there, so no problem missing that week, honestly.
Yeah, and for everyone else down there at the bottom, yeah, just again not the most surprising. LCN's just looked a bit I don't know if it comes off as mean to say, he looked a bit out of his depth, but just if you look at his total score, it's just quite a bit below everyone else here, even quite a bit below Guelo and Ice next to him further down the table. And LCN didn't miss any weeks, he played all of them. So that is just, I guess, something to improve on for next season if he manages, I guess, even if he doesn't manage to stay up. And yeah, Guelo just managing to stay ahead of Ice, who even in those last 2 good scores in the last 2 weeks, just not quite being able to claw it back. He won against Guelo in week 10 and then picked up a bonus point this week. Just at the start of the season, of sort of the first 9 weeks, just not quite good enough to be able to get into that relegation playoff.
Indeed. Well, yeah, let's take a look then at the Division 2 playoff and relegation playoff matches, promotion playoff and relegation matches. And yeah, for our promotion, it is Renata against Barry Fishy Bear. Barry Fishy Bear has been climbing through the ranks all the way from Division 4 over the last couple of seasons. Renata is a newcomer to this one. And the maps they will be playing: Jordan, Poland, and Europe. So definitely a very practicable one for them. Yeah, and I mean, Renata is the European, so maybe a slight advantage over Barry, but I'm not quite sure about that. It'll be really close. Yeah, your thoughts on this matchup, though, Clyde?
Yeah, so good job to Barry, especially. He'll be fighting for his 3rd straight promotion this season. So it would be certainly quite an achievement if he could pull off this win. Renata, of course, playing very well as well. They're both coming into this matchup with a lot of momentum. I think they've both won 6 of their last 7 matches, so they're both clearly playing very well as of late. In terms of the map selection, I'd say it's not much of a surprise to see Poland and Jordan as 2 of the maps, as both Barry and Renata got perfect scores when they played Poland in week 1 and got very close to perfect scores in Jordan in week 2. And even in the Europe week, they both scored above 24,000. So it seems that they clearly chose maps that they were comfortable with, or rather banned maps that they were less comfortable with. But yeah, we'll see if there's, say, like a more rural seed where they're more like remote roads without a lot of signage and whatnot. It could be tougher to score well, but yeah, with how talented they both are, I wouldn't be surprised to see a close, high-scoring match here.
Yeah, Calamity, these two did face off against each other in week 1 in Poland, one of our maps, both of them getting a perfect score in that one, unable to separate them last time around. So maybe we can already give them both a point for that one.
Well, they're gonna have to do it again if they want another point for it. But yeah, this is also one of the matchups that actually had sort of, gonna call it a perfect ban phase, where they banned different maps from each other, so we were just left with those 3 maps. I'd say it was about 30 to 40% of matches that ended up this way. More so, I think, in the higher divisions. Although, it was basically my match against Verdok in this match, and I think if I just take one quick look, it was 3 more matches later on that also went this way. So at least they both get to play maps that I guess they were ready for. And yeah, we as we said, they both had a very good regular season. Both did pretty well on those 3 specific maps. Renata losing her game in Europe against Chumi was perhaps the one, sort of out of order thing in those 3 maps. I think every other match up was at least a draw, if not a win. So it'll certainly be interesting. I don't think a few hundred points in the Europe map on the one game in the regular season is enough to sort of go, okay, now Barry is the clear favorite or anything like that. So I think the matchup is very even, and we'll see who of the 2 manages to come out on top of that one in the end.
All right, so good luck to them. At the other end, in the relegation playoff, is an all-American derby, LCN versus Guelo Wizard. LCN has also been kind of following Barry Fisher Bear up to the ranks, starting in Division 4 as well, but this season just not quite what he would have wanted. Guelo, though, a long-time Division 2 member, and be fighting for his survival. And Europe is the only map that stays the same for these 2. They choose Australia and a hard world instead. Clyde.
Yeah, Guelo's similar to me in that they're trying to stay in Division 2 for their 4th straight season, so they've been with me in Division 2 this whole time. So he certainly has a lot to play for here. LCN, being a newcomer, is obviously trying to prove that they belong in this division after their strong preseason. It's interesting to see Australia as one of the rounds for sure, not only because it was the 2nd most banned map behind Russia, I believe, but they also both didn't do particularly well when we played it in week 4. So again, I guess the more rural rounds with fewer clues could be a factor in determining who wins. And obviously a hard world could have more of those rural rounds as well. During the season, I guess it could be worth noting that Guelo performs significantly better than LCN in Australia and Europe, while LCN performs significantly better in a hard world. So they beat each other like 4,000 or 5,000 points in all of those weeks. So I guess based on that, I'd have to give a slight edge to Guelo in this matchup, but obviously it's only one game on each of those maps, and LCN certainly has the talent to win as well.
Yeah, Calamity.
Yeah, I generally agree with that assessment. Just looking at total score, Guelo should be a slight favorite at least, but especially on maps like Australia or Hard World, those are usually the maps where a lot can happen. Not kind of the maps where you'd expect, okay, if you made like one mistake, lost 200 points, it's game over, or uh, any kind of small points drop will not be recoverable. Um, those are the maps where you're like, okay, well, I've dropped 2,000 points in that round, shouldn't be too bad. Can make that up in another round. There have been pretty easy Australia seeds. I don't think we've seen too many pretty easy hard world seeds. And I think Australia especially is a map where you can go so quickly between getting like 24 point something and getting like 12k, just by the seeds being a bit different. One is a lot more rural than the other, and you just end up finding nothing. And I feel like generally that kind of matchup of these particular maps is the kind where we'll see the clearest games, in the sense that we'll have the sort of the biggest gaps on the maps in particular. And I think it's a unique matchup actually with these maps. I don't think those maps are played in any other matchup in that same sort of order. And both of them actually banned Poland, interestingly enough. I think that's also the almost a unique factor of that game. I don't think that's happened anywhere else. But LCN also banned Russia, and Guelo banned Canada. So the sort of random generator took out Jordan as well. And we were left with these three. And yeah, I certainly think it's going to be an interesting match. As I said, Guelo is slight favorite, even though LCN finished 5 points ahead of him in the table. And yeah, we'll see if Guelo can stay in Division 2 here.
Very nice. Well, let's shift over then to Division 3 and their results on the IntersectionGuessr world map. Yeah, we had some players who were really fighting for everything, and they had some pretty big mountains to climb. But unfortunately, it looked like everything came out pretty much as we would have expected it. WTF Armand coming out with the win there, and Bubat in third was against his red carded match. He didn't have to really worry about it too much, but a very nice score anyway in that. And yeah, a nice win for Seppo Clyde, but pretty much just a little bit too late.
Yeah, I mean, I would say this seed in general was definitely tougher than the Division 2 seed, although I got a better score on this seed for some reason. It was tougher to find the information you needed, so there's that. And yeah, like you said, solid performances by WTF and Steal This Nick, getting above 23,000. Especially Bootbot getting 24,600, even though they technically didn't need a great score on their bye week. They did really well. Armand also getting perhaps like a middling score compared to the rest of the division, but regardless, he does get the win, which I believe makes him undefeated on the season, which is very impressive considering the other people in the division. So good for him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we were looking really at Closed and Freckles here, Calamity, who had a shot at probably slipping into that final promotion playoff spot, but both of them unable to do that.
Yeah, it was mainly Freckles at that point, because Closed was already behind Steal the Snick on total score, and with Steal the Snick winning, he kind of didn't have a chance anymore anyway. But Freckles definitely could have made it to that fourth place. He was there before this game, and Amor definitely left enough room to allow him to get in there. And I wouldn't say the seed in general was that hard. It was just one particular round in Indonesia that might as well have come from a hard world seed, to be honest. Just in those islands south of Singapore, and on that, just about as far away from any civilization as you can get. I think in the 4 minutes, I could barely like make it to some text to find out, okay, it is Indonesia, but that was about it. So would have been, I think, a pretty big advantage to anyone who's seen that kind of spot before, because it is very unique. But if you haven't, then yeah, good luck trying to get a good score in that round. And yeah, just slightly better edge there for Amor, who, as Clyde said, make sure he stays undefeated. Probably cared less about that than Freckles would have for the promotion playoff, but it is how it is. And yeah, still the Snick beating Pastek, just sneaking in there. And yeah, Seppo against Hugo with a draw there. Seppo, I think I said this last week as well, but with a very good end of the season. So interesting. Looking forward to the relegation playoffs. But other than that, yeah, some decent scores in the for Bupat and Paulinho against the red carded players. As we said, pretty much both of them not too relevant anymore. Paulinho could have, in theory, made it to the promotion playoffs if all of the other matches had gone his way, but not quite. I mean, he got close, but not quite. If Steel the Sneak had lost, he would have actually made it there.
Yeah, 2 out of 3. So
Yep.
just needed one more match to go his way, and unfortunately, that did not happen. So if we switch over and look at this table, yeah, Steal This Nick trades places with Freckles. So one Italian gives up his spot for another, and that will round out the playoff spots. Yeah, middle of the table, looking at Paulinho, Freckles, Hugo, and Closed, but very close in points there, at least towards the very end. I think Hugo, after especially last season, he will be really happy to be quite safe in that mid-table. Of course, a lot of these players are boosted by the fact that Blockchain and Firebond both dropped out, so there are no automatic relegation spots. And the only ones we have to worry about is only one person going down between Seppo and Pastek, Clyde.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much new to add, but it would have been interesting to see what Blockchain could have done this season had they been able to play all of their matches, just because I know I'd played them in Division 2 before, and they're certainly a good competitor. So perhaps that might have shifted the table a little bit, but it is what it is. Obviously, Steel Nick stealing that 4th spot from his fellow Italian, Dem Freckles, was the biggest development on the table for sure.
Yeah, Clement, I'm sure we would have also liked to see what Firebond could have done this season. He really came onto the scene in quite spectacular fashion, taking out Division 5 and 4 on his way up. Just unfortunately withdrew a little bit too late in this one.
Yeah, definitely. Would have been interesting, but it is how it is. And I'm sure Seppo and Pastek will be happy about getting another chance to stay up. Pastek now second season in a row where he's finished last in his division. He said he'd practice more this season. I don't know if he did or not. He will actually be talk to him. He will be streaming his playoff game. I think on the deadline day, sort of in the morning European time, maybe midday or something around that. So if anyone's interested, you can go and watch that. Just Twitch name, I think, is just what you can see there on screen. So that'll be an interesting game for sure. And yeah, looking at the whole division, I don't think too much of what happened this season is too surprising. If anything, WTF being so high up there in second place is the surprise of the division. If you look at his total score as well, not anything outstanding. Quite far behind, and 13 aces, actually 14. So slight mistake there, but not too big of an issue. It doesn't change too much. Very far behind, Amon, and even still a bit behind Bubat's. But to be honest, generally the aces in Division 3 were very low, so maybe just difficult maps, difficult locations to pinpoint over the course of the whole season, and just Amon being able to handle them. Other than that, nothing too surprising, I would say. Freckles could have made it. We also had quite a few yellow cards actually for Freckles and for Hugo and for Pastek as well. So both Hugo and Freckles could have been in that 4th place had they played their games in that week and won, of course. And yeah, very, very close mid-table from Paulinho in 5th to Closed in 8th, just 1 point apart from each other. And yeah, certainly will be interesting again next season.
Definitely. Well, let's look at more closely then at these promotion and relegation playoff matches. First, in our promotion match, we've got Bubat versus Steal This Nick. Of course, Steal This Nick just sneaking in there in the last week for that, and they will be playing on Jordan, Poland, and Europe. So two Europeans and kind of a European heavy map pool for this one, Clyde.
Yeah, this is the same map selection as it was for Renata and Barry, I believe. So just looking at their results from this season, Bootbot did slightly better than Nick in Poland, beating Steal This Nick by a couple thousand. They both got perfect scores in Jordan, so kind of a wash there. I guess if there's a more urban seed, then we can expect something similar. And the highest score discrepancy between the two was in Europe, with Boobot getting 24,800 and Nick getting just shy of 20,000. So perhaps the maps favor Boobot, but yeah, again, on any given seed, anything can happen. Like Steal This Nick won against Boobot in Ukraine by almost 7,000 points in week 10. Well, they didn't play each other, but he got a much higher score. So he's shown that he can do well in Europe, or at least in Ukraine or perhaps other countries with Cyrillic. So how these guys perform may just come down to the seed that they get. So we'll see.
Yeah, nice. And Calamity, I think we've seen Steal This Nick over the years really struggle with consistency. Definitely has the skill to be able to play in Division 2, but he got stuck in Division 4 for a while simply on the fact that he'd always throw one or two games more than he should have. And hopefully that doesn't happen here.
Yeah, I mean, the maps in general seem like the standard playoff maps we have this season. And yeah, I think there's nothing too surprising there. We'll see who will end up the better of the two. I think if you look at the regular season, they've actually been surprisingly close. The total score is only 3,000 points apart. Aces as well, just 3 apart. Just a slight edge for Bubat. And yeah, definitely interesting. I think Bubat is a lot more comfortable in general with the, the time limits. I feel like Steal This Nick is still, as we've seen in previous seasons, always kind of on that limit with his time. So, just maybe wouldn't necessarily do too well in Division 2 next season if he does manage to get promoted. I'm a lot more confident about Bubat in that regards, that he wouldn't really have too many problems, even if there's another 30 seconds shaved off of the time limit. And yeah, we'll see who manages to come out on top between those two. As I said, I feel like Bubat is the slight favorite here.
Okay, well, then for our relegation at the other side, it is Seppo versus Pashtek. You mentioned it earlier that Pashtek is the second season in a row at the bottom of his table. But Seppo also surviving a scare last season, I believe, and they were on Jordan, Hard World, and Europe, Clyde.
Yeah, so I know Pastek was in Division 2 last season and unfortunately got relegated. And I believe Seppo was in Division 2 in Season 3 and got relegated then. So they both probably have some motivation to stay in Division 3 and prove that they belong there. Matchup-wise, I'd say they're fairly even. Pastek did do a bit better than Seppo and Jordan during the season, getting a couple thousand points more than them. They were practically evenly matched in the Hard World, both got around 24,000. And Pastek did slightly better than Seppo in Europe, but it's only one game. There's really not a whole lot that can be drawn from that. Seppo has probably had the better season overall compared to Pastek. He got both more points and a higher total score, but it seems that Pastek has just a bit of an edge in those particular maps. They also have a few more aces than Seppo, which could be significant, but still I can't really say either of them have a clear advantage. So yeah, I guess I'm excited to see who comes out on top.
Yeah, one thing that you did mention, Calamity, is that Seppo's been having a pretty good sort of end to the season. He didn't start out too well, so that might be a slight thing in his favor.
Yeah, it could be for sure a bit of a motivational boost. He had, let me just quickly check, 6 points in the last 3 weeks. So definitely a pretty good finish to the season there, especially if you compare it to Pastek, who had no points in the last 4. And I think the maps are pretty good. You'd expect both of them to do pretty reasonably well in Europe and probably also in Jordan, to be honest. And then Hardworld is going to be a pretty interesting one where Pastek did incredibly well during the regular season, and so did Seppo. So yeah, very, very interesting maps for the both of them. And yeah, obviously, if you look at the table, it's very difficult to pick out a favorite there, I would say. Obviously, Seppo with about 11,000 points more in total score, but Pastek also missed a week in Ukraine. So they're pretty much even there as well. And, if in terms of form, you maybe slightly favors Seppo here.
Yeah, definitely. Well, good luck to both of them. Definitely practicable maps, at least in Jordan and in Europe. Hard World, of course, anything is up for grabs depending on the seed, but it'll be interesting to see who will be surviving in Division 3 and who will be headed to Division 4 next season. Well, now into Division 4, and we had a first round, our semifinals of our playoffs in both the promotion and relegation side of things. So let's look at Division 4. And it was Division 4B who came out on top. Nakiro and Carp both taking very convincing wins against their 4A opponents. Clyde?
Yeah, just looking at the individual matchups for Nakiro versus Hexalt, they both made mistakes in the same round, although Hexalt's mistake was a bit more significant. It was round 4 in Mexico. You'll probably notice a theme with a lot of these results. It turns out that round was the one that decided a lot of these matches because the rest of the rounds were relatively easy. And yeah, I guess Hexalt just got a bit unlucky, perhaps went in the wrong direction, since if they had gone east instead of west, they would have run into a sign that had said, "Welcome to the state of Jalisco." But yeah, besides that, both of them were basically perfect on the other rounds. So it was really one unlucky round for Hexalt, and I believe it was the same for Solar Sensei as well. So yeah, great performances by everyone, honestly, in that semifinal. It was just that one tricky Mexico round that ended up undoing some people's performances.
Yeah, exactly. Calamity.
Yeah, and essentially, you, as Clyde said, you'll see that trend throughout most games. I think pretty much except, let me just quickly take one look. In the relegation playoffs, there was one person who dropped, I'm going to call it a significant number of points. I think it was like 500 or so in another round as well. But apart from that, I think we pretty much saw 5Ks for all of the players in all of the other rounds, just except that one round in Mexico. And it's always a bit of a shame that that's, just one round essentially where you can just go the wrong way, can decide a whole season for you. I didn't actually think the other 4 rounds were that easy. Maybe I would have gone for a different seed then. I don't generally like throwing out seeds just for reasons like that. But yeah, as I said, I didn't expect the other rounds to be that much of a non-factor essentially. But yeah, so the one nice thing, I suppose, at least, is that not only in this Division 4 promotion race, but in all the kind of like brackets, so Division 4 and Division 5, there was actually no matchups where sort of the third best player advanced and sort of the second best player got unlucky by playing the first best player. That never happened in any of the matchups, so at least that's quite nice.
Indeed. Well, yeah, our promotion playoff final between Carp and Nocturnal, they'll be playing on Australia, Europe, and Canada. This is the first time we've seen Canada appear on any of these maps. Yeah, Carp started off very hot this season, has been in a bit of a slump, but while Nocturnal has been pretty consistent throughout the entire season. So any idea who might come out on top at this best of three, Clyde?
Yeah, I mean, Carp did get a perfect score on his semifinal, so he'll definitely be looking to ride the momentum from that. And honestly, it could be their pinpointing that could make the difference here. They do have 5 perfect scores on the season, including last week, compared to 1 for Nakiro. And Carp does have a slight advantage in aces as well. I think it's 35-30, including last week. So Australia and Canada in particular are places where pinpointing can be really important, considering the amount of rural locations and long roads you can get in those countries and whatnot. So yeah, it could be worth noting as well that Carp did get a perfect score in Australia this season. Nakiro did outperform Carp in Europe, but Carp outperformed Nakiro in Canada. So yeah, I mean, I guess I can call Carp a favorite for this matchup, but not a large one by any means. Nakiro can certainly make it a good match.
Yeah, Calamity.
Yeah, I agree with most of that. Definitely Europe could be a seed that could be dependent on sort of the locations, how difficult they are, as you'd expect Nakiro to be a slight favorite there just based on where they are both from. But, if you get 5 easy locations, it doesn't matter if you're from there, you're still going to get them right. So it's going to be interesting to see that seed for that. And then, yeah, Australia and Canada, probably one of, if not the only matchup that has that. No, it's not the only matchup that has that combination. We'll see it one more time. But yeah, Canada, a relative rarity in these matchups. So it'll be interesting to see how those will go. I think, yeah, in general, it's fair to say Carp is the slight favorite, even if he had a not so good end to the season. His start to the season was very impressive, and they both were in the same division, and Carp has had the advantage there during the regular season. So I think you could expect things to go in his favor if everything's just happening as normal. But there's always a lot that can happen in playoff games, and it's certainly not out of the question for Nakiro to pull off an upset here.
Yeah, definitely. Carp hasn't had the best to the end of the season, so who knows? Have 3 more maps, how those will go, but it'll be interesting to find out. At the other end, we had another perfect game, this time by Dromi in the relegation matchups against Trebleha, so he'll advance and be safe. And I just survive only by about not even 300 something points against Wakelok, meaning it is Trebleha and Wakelok who will face off against each other to survive in Division 4. And I will say that I don't think that pinpointing was the easiest in this seed, but definitely the countries were very obvious. Even in the Mexico round, you're kind of like, well, it's sort of Central America somewhere, and then Mexico is your best bet. But yeah, that Mexican round was pretty bad. Definitely did not see that state sign that you mentioned, Clyde. So that would have been nice to see. That's probably what Dromi saw in his perfect game.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Dromi was one of the handful of players who was able to pinpoint that Mexico round. So again, kudos to him. Even seeing that sign, pinpointing from there and getting a 5K was not an easy task. Like when I played through it, I wasn't able to do it. So yeah. Let's see. Yeah, Treblia still, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Treblia?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah,
Treblia
just
still
go
got
with
a
whatever
solid
you
score.
think.
Okay. But yeah, Triblia, I think, is the one who had a few pinpointing mistakes in other countries. Like, I think Ireland and one of the Slovenia rounds, they just didn't quite get a 5K. And I guess unfortunately for them, they needed to be perfect and just came up short. And yeah, Zotomo versus Wakelock. Wakelock actually guessed in the right state technically for that round, but Zotomo was just a bit closer, so perhaps a bit unlucky for them, but I guess that's just how it shakes out sometimes. Let's see. Looking at the final for the relegation playoffs, Poland, Jordan, and Europe, fairly common combination of maps as we've seen. Looking at how the season went, Wakelock and Triblia did have similar scores in Poland. I guess not a great score in Jordan relative to the rest of the division, but a decent score in Europe, although Triblia did score around 1,000 points higher. So if I had to choose, I'd probably give a slight advantage to Triblia, just based on those maps, but Wakelock does have a slight advantage in aces, 25-20. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Wakelock pull out a win if they can pinpoint accurately, especially in the tougher rounds. So we'll see.
Yeah, Calamity, we've definitely seen that Tripla has had pretty much just a very unlucky season, and that continued in her relegation battle. But out of a best of 3, probably she has enough to stay up.
It could be interesting. I don't think her season has been super unlucky. If you look at her stats, she's right around where she should be. It's just very, very close between sort of like 10th and 7th, maybe even up to 6th in her division. So could have ended up in any of the other places too. Could have been safe, but also could have been automatically relegated. So, well, there is one more game for her to play. Yeah, she was the player I mentioned earlier who didn't score essentially perfect on one round other than Mexico. A few pinpointing mistakes as well, but the one round she did particularly bad on, I suppose, with dropping 550 points was Ireland. So yeah, for the final, it could be an interesting one, as always, Poland, Jordan, Europe at this point, basically. And yeah, I think this one is super difficult to call. Wakelock has quite a big advantage in terms of experience. He's been here pretty much forever. Let me just quickly check if he was here in season 1.
Yeah,
yes, he was.
Season 2 and beyond. Okay.
So he's got the advantage in that, and he had pretty good games throughout the season. So also had a better score than Trebliha on the semi-final game. So I would say this is another game that's pretty even, and it'll depend on the seeds and how they feel on the day.
Nice. Well, moving then on to Division 5 and their promotion playoff spots, it is Jack and Ollie who win their games. These scores a little bit lower than the Division 4, so perhaps a little bit tougher of a seed in this one. But yeah, pretty convincing wins for both of them, which is probably not what we wanted to have happen with Artificial after he just got very unlucky to lose his automatic promotion spot in the last week. Clyde?
Yeah, looking at the semifinal for Artificial versus Jack, Artificial got a bit unlucky again. I mean, they only had one real significant mistake, but unfortunately it was guessing on the opposite side of Indonesia in round 1, which is what sunk them. I guess they just couldn't find the information that they needed for that round. Jack made 2 smaller errors in rounds 1 and 2, but he did get the right province in Indonesia, Aceh, I believe it was, and he also found the right mountain range in Russia, even though he couldn't quite pinpoint it perfectly. So I would say those were the 2 most difficult rounds of the seed, probably, being in very large countries. So solid game for Jack. Great game by Ollie as well, with the Indonesia round being the only one where they lost significant points, and by significant I mean like 170. And even then, like, I don't think anyone actually 5K'd that Indonesia round, so he did just about as well as he could have. And Danny, similar to Jack, lost most of their points on rounds 1 and 2, which is understandable. He got the right general areas for both of those rounds, but just wasn't quite as precise. So yeah, either way, not a performance to be ashamed of, even if they would have liked to win.
Yeah, Calamity Danny Blondes misses out again. Just not his couple seasons. He'll have to try again next time.
Yeah, just again up against a very good Ollie there in that semi-final. Yeah, no one did manage to 5k that first round. A couple people got, somewhat close, and I think there were quite a few signs that mentioned sort of the general area and some of the cities there. The actual very interesting part about that is that I wasn't aware that that province pretty much has no coverage. It's essentially just that very small part down there that has a little bit, and the rest of the province is completely without, which is good to know, because that's one spot less I have to check in Indonesia in the future. And a lot of people, I guess, falling for that as well in a sense. Danny Blondes, for example, as well guessed in a spot that doesn't have coverage, although he in particular didn't guess too far away from where coverage would be. I think Hexalt as well, who played that seed, Basement, a couple of others, guessing in areas that weren't particularly close to where coverage is. But obviously, still, if you guess there, you're gonna be much better off than Artificial, who guessed in Sulawesi. So, yeah, that's pretty much sealed his fate already. Must have just gone past those signs, didn't quite, wasn't quite able to read them, something like that. And yeah, Ollie against Jack will be interesting in the finals. Russia. Jack was actually the only one who did not send me any bans, and also, still made it to that game where he would have needed them. There were, I think, 2 other people who didn't, but they just dropped out earlier. And so the random generator selected Hard World and Europe for his bans, so they're playing Russia alongside Poland and Jordan. And yeah, I feel like that match could really go either way. I think Ollie has been a bit more consistent over the course of the season, but Jack has had quite a few more aces. Total score very similar between the two, but 28 to 18 aces in Jack's favor is a very significant advantage. But well, I assume that will mostly come into play in Poland and Jordan, which can be very pinpoint heavy. They don't have to be. Jordan especially can just throw you around in there. Poland as well, I suppose, where you have just one round that's in the middle of nowhere, you can't find it, and then every other round and it's pinpointing just doesn't matter. Russia, I think, is probably not going to be too pinpoint heavy on that one.
Yeah, well, good luck to both of them. Ollie has been in Reddit League a few seasons now, so it'd be nice to see if he can get promoted to Division 4. Jack, in his first season here, will be looking to move up out of the lowest division into Division 4 for them. At the other end, people looking to survive and not have to requalify. Paranoid Android and Pigwin will be very lucky, and they'll be safe in the division once again, and it is Soundbite and Arno who will have one final chance in the best of 3 to stay alive on Australia, Europe, and Canada. So yeah, Clyde, Soundbite having a pretty decent season, all things considered, being in the relegation battle, but still pretty decent, but not a very good score in this one.
Yeah, I think Soundbite was mostly sunk on the Russia round. I forgot which round that was, but I think he just guessed too far west and lost a lot of points. He also lost a couple thousand points on the Mexico round, so probably not the performance they were looking for. But Android did have a fairly solid performance. They also lost most of their points on the Russia round, but they still had a quite solid performance. So yeah, looking at the semifinal between Penguin and Arno No, it's a fairly similar story. Arno No was just Arno No. I should say, was again just derailed by that Russia round. Unfortunately, they just guessed in the wrong mountain range. They guessed in the one near Georgia instead of the one next to Mongolia. So they couldn't quite recover from that. And yeah, solid performance by Penguin, losing just a few points on rounds 2 and 3, but still getting the general area right. So overall, I would say Android and Penguin made a couple of mistakes, but just less costly mistakes than their opponents.
Yeah, Calamity.
Yeah, I feel like in these matches in particular, I think Soundbite just not his best game there. I think in general he's not too comfortable about Russia. Let me just quickly look up his score during the regular season to ensure that I'm not okay. He had about 13k, so that is pretty much correct. And yeah, just a bit too far away on that, and that already would have meant or decided his loss. Just too far away in Mexico as well, which wasn't particularly difficult, I think. Meant that he was just a little bit further away from Paranoid as well in that regard, who, yeah, as we said, only dropped pretty much points in Russia mainly. And yeah, Penguin with a great score there. Actually, pretty much the second best score out of all the Division 5 players in this seed. Would have even beaten 3 of the players in the promotion playoff. So very good job by him. He had a few rounds. He only had one ace pretty much. So a few rounds where he dropped points here and there. But no, just, yeah, wrong mountain range in Russia pretty much ended his hopes. He did very well on the other 4 rounds, but just not quite enough. And for the final between Soundbite and no, I do think the Frenchman here is pretty much the favorite based on his performances so far. Soundbite has vastly improved from his performances in season 3 back then when he initially got relegated. But I think no might just be a little bit too big of a task to overcome. Although, you know, Australia, again, I think Soundbite is very happy about that. And Canada probably also, you know, at least a map where you can afford a mistake here or there. So I think the maps aren't too bad for him. But yeah, it would be an upset if he manages to pull off a win here.
Oh, very nice. Well, good luck to all of our playoff contenders, whether they're trying to survive or get promoted. Yeah, best of 3s are always interesting to see how those turn out. 2-0s, 1-2s, never quite sure. Yeah, we don't really have any maps to talk about this week because everybody's playing a best of 3 on a various set of maps. So to finish things up, we do have Reddit League next, and they finished up their season in IntersectionGuessr. And yeah, Calamity, after 11 long weeks, Chris and Jordy left separated by 2 total points, and their Canadian member joining them in Division 5 next season, also only a couple hundred points behind, actually about 1,000 points behind.
Yeah, about 1,400, but incredibly close. I don't think anyone could have expected the results to finish that closely, especially if you look at sort of the individual scores over the course of the weeks, where it's not like they were always very close to like the perfect score and just dropped the point here, dropped the point there. No, they dropped plenty of points throughout, but ended just 2 points away from each other at the end of the season. I feel like if you look at the whole picture here, a very deserved 3 players to go free there, all of them very, very close to each other. And then we do have quite a bit of a gap, even though, you know, 16,000 points, while it may sound a lot, still isn't really that much to Alka City, and then Angkor with another 12,000 points behind there. They'll get their chance next season. Technically, you know, you are still allowed to play the preseason next season as well, even if you didn't secure an automatic spot here. This basically just means our top three have their spot secure and they don't need to bother with the preseason. Of course, as always as well, you know, you can't play the preseason and then suddenly end up in Division 1 or something like that. Even if you do well there, Division 5 is as good as it's going to get. But they do still have their chance, and maybe they'll use the experiences they've gained over the course of this season to, you know, do a little bit better on preseason next time. And maybe they'll make their way into the Division 5 after all.
Yeah, well, congrats to those three, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the regular season come season 6 of Reddit League. And thank you all for watching this show with us. We have lots of playoff matches this week. This is when it really gets interesting, so you don't want to miss anything. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you'll be up on all the latest news as things unfold. And yeah, we will see you all next week. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.